Why would any woman go to church? By believe it or not. Answer: the women rule the church. The church serves the female congregation. That's why, believe it or not. The women in the congregation get all the benefits of going to church and none of the drawbacks. They get to be told they're going to live forever in paradise and that they're special. And any of the drawbacks that the book, the religion supposedly demands will not be enforced by that church. That's why. For example, the church goes on about the family unit and how important it is. Do churches allow divorce? Yes, they do. So they're for encouragement of the breakup of the family unit. Is the church against child support, where the husband becomes enslaved to the woman and is kicked out of the family unit? No, they're not. There's no Bible verses against that. No churches voices any, dissent against that. So they enforce male gender roles while allowing women all the freedom they want. That's why, in a nutshell. Now, we'll start at the beginning here. Let's see if we can get at the very beginning. Just a moment here. Okay, after seeing this guy's face, I can see why he's a male feminist. Let's hear him.
Hey, everybody, just a quick trigger warning before we get started here. We talk about women in the church, so of course we're going to talk about a lot of misogyny and a lot of sexism and abuse. So beware of that. Be ready.
Really, I don't bother with trigger warnings. I just say what I'm going to say. People who deal with trigger warnings, they're cringe. But more to the point, there's not going to be any misogyny, right? And as for abuse, the only ones I hear getting abused in the church are usually altar boys. It's usually young boys that suffer abuse in the church. I don't know any that women have suffered. So these guy's full of crap. But you're going to see, guys, that the church is actually misandric. It's not misogynist. It worships women. Matter of fact, believe it or not, why do people pray to Mother Mary if it's a misogynistic, uh, what do you call it, institution? Mother Mary is sometimes prayed to first before Jesus Christ or God. And all she did was incubate Jesus. That's the only thing she did. She never sacrificed herself in any way. She didn't die for anything, for any cause. She didn't do anything other than spread her legs and get knocked up. And yet people put her above any male saint that has ever existed. People worship women. You worship women. The worship of women is the oldest religion in existence. And it takes priority over any other religion.
Ready for that. If you aren't ready for that, skip it, catch us on the next one, or watch it when you're having a different kind of day. I'd also like to point out that I am a man and I have no experience being a woman. So I don't know the full picture.
Really, then why did you make an hour-long video about this? If you don't know what you're talking about, you should keep your mouth shut. Now, again, guys, this is more female worship. God works in mysterious ways. You can't know the mind of your goddess. Well, believe it or not, to us uh, guys who have self-respect, women are very understandable. Their actions speak for themselves. Their motivations are obvious if you're not in denial, and they're easy and they're simple. So you can't understand it because you worship them. And I think it's a good idea that you showed that guy with the t-shirt to represent yourself. So, even these guys can't help but contradict themselves. Church is misogynistic. Let's show this skit where the woman is being chased and worshipped by men and she rejects them. Yeah, that's brilliant. Okay, we'll get into the first important thing. What's the real issue he has right now? What's the abuse that women so supposedly suffer? Well, they aren't allowed to become pastors in some of those churches. They're not allowed top spot. That's the big abuse, right? Never mind all those little boys that get, uh, sexually assaulted. Just worry about these women who can't climb the ladder.
The Southern Baptist Convention officially opposes women as pastors, and this controversy dates back to 2021 when Pastor Warren ordained 3 women as pastors.
I'm excited to have a woman in charge.
The world's moving too fast. Enough already.
You see,
Yeah, there's a few churches that did that, but a lot of churches do allow women to become pastors. So you can't say the church is misogynistic over that, can you?
for a lot of Christians, having to hear a woman's opinion is a grave sin.
Yeah, but it's not a woman's opinion. She's speaking about the Bible. She's speaking about the Word of God. That's not an opinion. So this is very revealing of what you're saying or what you're thinking. So when a woman is a pastor, you're basically saying she is God. She's not speaking for God. She's giving her opinion.
Despite the fact that the majority of church attendees are women. The Bible is kind of sexist, and therefore...
No, it's very sexist towards men. You guys are going to see this later.
So are a lot of churches, and so are a lot of Christians.
Just needs to be stated clearly. I know that we are all on the same page, but unfortunately, these sorts of things go out on this thing called the internet in our pockets.
It's actually just called the internet. You don't have to add the in our pockets part.
And it is just important to state clearly that in no way, shape, or form does the Bible teach or commend that women are to be ordained pastors, ordained elders.
Now, since you're in denial of gender dynamics, you don't realize what the actual purpose of this is. Women are hypergamous, or I should start off with the fact that men want to get together with women, and women are hypergamous, which means if you're a male pastor, you might have access to the women in the congregation. But if a woman becomes a pastor, she won't bother with the men in the congregation. She'll see them as beneath them. If women got together with men for the male personhood, for the man that he is, because she loved him, there would be none of these restrictions pushed. Men wouldn't need to do this. They wouldn't care. They said, let women become pastors because the gorgeous female pastor has been eyeing me, the lowly male congregate, and I get to be with her. Unless, believe it or not, you see men's desire for women as misogyny, in which case that would make you a prime misogynist. Just thought I'd drop that on you.
So,
Yay, round of applause. You see, it all started when Eve ate the fruit.
Because Adam was created first and Eve was created for Adam. And then also the Eve was deceived into sin while Adam was not.
But Adam did sin because he also ate the fruit. Are you saying that he wasn't deceived into that sin and that he just did it because? If Eve...
Actually, no, it wasn't deception, it was temptation. And this is very telling about the genders, right? The serpent couldn't tempt Adam directly. The serpent didn't have anything Adam wanted. Adam wanted Eve. So if the serpent wanted Adam, he had to go through Eve first. And since Eve didn't give a shit about Adam, she could be tempted because she didn't care about him in the first place. It's just like Samson and Delilah. No one could defeat Samson. So they got to him through Delilah, who turned on him. It also shows you that there's a sense of morality and justice that men have that women lack. That's what the stories are really saying. And yet, men's biggest downfall is the fact that they don't worship God. They worship women. Adam and Samson sold their God out for the female of their species. Think about that. That's who they actually worship. Just thought I'd let you know. I'm glad he brought up this little diagram, because this again proves what I'm talking about. The husband is supposed to be above the wife, but what does the husband do? He protects the family, the wife, and he provides for the family, the wife. What does the wife do? She manages the children in the home. In other words, she's in charge of the home. The man works for the wife. So he's going to talk about this diagram and try to spin it that the husband is above the wife.
Brought this up before, but if you have been part of an evangelical church at any point in your life...
Oh, by the way, if the church made this, the church is for gender roles for men. The church is demanding that men provide, work for the woman, not the other way around.
It's very likely that you've seen this diagram. And of course, this is more about roles in marriage, which, believe me, we'll get to. But they say over and over again that it doesn't mean that you are less than your husband. It's just a different role. Or the woman...
They are bullshitting. The woman is above the husband. The husband is less than the woman. Because the husband has to work for the woman. Believe it or not.
Isn't less than a man. They just have different roles. But they always include God in that list. So it's obviously a hierarchy, right? Or God is equal to us?
No, don't be silly. It's obvious. It's supposed to be God, husband, and wife. But in actuality, to make it truthful, it'd be wife, God, then husband. The wife rules, the church serves the wife, and the husband serves the church. That's how it actually goes. Now, next thing. This proves my point even further.
There's a difference today between men and women, but our world today wants to blur all difference.
Oh, this is stopping on me? What's going on here? Oh, yeah, get up.
And so anybody who just gets up and says, hey, we're going to treat our sons and daughters differently, people freak out about that because they have this weird sense of equality and fairness. It's not biblical. Okay, what does the Bible teach? That there's a big difference. Now, look.
So this, of course, is hate pastor Steven Anderson, who has been banned from over 30 countries because of his hate speech.
Really? He was banned by 30 countries and the church allowed this? The misogynistic church didn't support him? Well, they're not very good patriarchs, are they? No, because the church serves the women, and that's why they support them in this case. He wouldn't be banned otherwise. So thank you for admitting that. It defeats that lie there. Now we'll get to the next thing.
Or if I've ever communicated anything that could be interpreted that, then I've missed the mark by such an incredible chasm.
So any reading of the Bible that is sexist is just a misinterpretation. So for instance, in Deuteronomy 22, when it says, if, however, the charge is true and no proof of the young woman's virginity can be found, She shall be brought to the door of her father's house, and there the men of her town shall stone her to death. She has done an outrageous thing in Israel by being promiscuous while still in her father's house. You must purge the evil from among you.
Okay. Now, the first thing, before we get to what's been read, we'll look at the actions of the church. How many women are being stoned for being promiscuous? None. The church begs women not to be promiscuous, but it doesn't do anything to stop it. Right? So actions speak louder than words. We could leave it at that. But I also want to point out what this passage is actually saying. It's saying the father is a servant, and like that diagram said, right? He has to protect and provide for his wife. He doesn't want a bunch of daughters to do the same. He's already got one leech. So he wants her to get married to a man. He wants her to find a sucker so he can take up the burden of looking after her. And the only thing the guy wants, which is sad, but the only thing he wants is that the woman hasn't been touched by other men. And that's misandric. Again, believe it or not. My goddess has been ruined by another man. My God has been ruined by a mere mortal. Right? The core of it is misandric. And the meanwhile, while she's in her father's house, in other words, she wants the world. She wants the father to look after her while she sleeps around. And the father's just saying, look, I want you to keep your legs together long enough to sucker some guy to be your servant. And you don't have the brain power for that? That's what's going on here. All this woman had to do was keep her legs together. Anyway, we'll skim ahead to other important things. Ah, yes, this one with the puppet. This is a funny one.
Puppet?
You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife or his male or female servants.
Now notice his wife is separate from his male and female servants because she's not a servant.
Seriously, how do kids enjoy this?
His ox or donkey or anything that belongs to your neighbor.
Anything that belongs to your neighbor. It's pretty clear here that the wife is one of the things that belongs to her husband.
But what's being owned? What's being owned? For sexuality. Because when it comes to male servants, he owns what? He owns the man's labors. The man works for the master. She's not a servant. So what does he own from her? Her sexuality. He wants her to be loyal to him, not to fool around with other men. And I have to ask you, believe it or not, if some woman came to you and said, my husband's sleeping around, would you support her or be against her? I bet you'd support her because a woman believes she owns her husband's sexuality. She does not want him sleeping around with other women. So if you see that passage as misogynistic, the average woman is misandric. Now, I know you're not going to, be equal between the genders. You're going to have double standards. And of course, this desire to have a woman's sex all to himself is going to be considered owning her, even though women want the same thing from their husbands, and they aren't considered owning him. See, double standards all around, right?
We've already covered the fact that just a few verses earlier, the Bible affirms that the wife is worthy of honor equal to that of her husband in regard to their children. It wouldn't make sense for the...
Wow. So these misogynistic men The Middle East is supposed to be misogynistic, especially that era. And here they are saying women should be honored. Okay.
A biblical author to then immediately undermine his own teaching by saying that women are on the same level as houses and animals.
First of all, you don't really need to dismiss the idea that a biblical author would do something that doesn't make sense. And a lot of the writings of the Old Testament...
What do you mean it doesn't make sense? Men worship women. You worship women. So a biblical author saying women should be, honored makes perfect sense.
And aren't by the same author. They're a mashing together of different writings. And a list of 10 rules is very likely to be a collection of different writings. And children are supposed to look up to their mothers according to the Bible.
Thank you for admitting that. So yeah, there's different writers, but the fact that male writers existed that had this attitude towards women at that time and at that place, that disavows your propaganda against your fellow man.
That doesn't mean that other places women aren't seen as property when it's not a mother and child situation. We've all seen those men who will yell at their kids for not respecting their mom and then go to the bar and talk trash about their wife. People are...
So you see men simply talking trash about their wives as owning them? You are aware that women bash men all the time on the regular. Do they consider their men owned? Do you consider them owning their men when they do that? No, these guys, you just admit it. He supports the woman. He respects his wife in front of his children. And then he blows off steam to his friends. And you're against that? And again, women do the same thing to their husbands. Matter of fact, a woman is much more likely to trash a man in front of his children. You leave that out too. But none of this has anything to do with ownership. All you're saying is men shouldn't be allowed to gripe. You're so slave-minded. You hate your fellow man so much, you don't want us to have any kind of freedom whatsoever. That is sad. Okay, let's get into this.
Explicitly forbids a husband from treating a woman as a slave and selling her, even if she was a war captive from another nation. Deuteronomy chapter 21.
No, not even if, just if. There are plenty of times you are allowed to sell a woman, like when the Bible gives instructions on how to sell your daughter as a slave. But there were also some cases...
Could they sell their sons as slaves? If they could, then it's not misogynistic. It's gender neutral. Right.
Where they weren't allowed to sell women they took in war, but that was usually commanded per war or per genocide.
Thank you for admitting the word genocide. So, who got genocide? The men and boys. But the women got to live. And not live as sex slaves. They got to live as prospective wives. Wives who got to basically be in charge of the household, right? Where's that diagram again? Yeah. If they were forced to marry these women, then the men would have to protect and provide for them. They'd have to work for them. All wars, believe it or not, are about women. It's about gaining women, access to women. This is much more direct. The way, kill the men and take the women for wives. But in the modern sense, it's usually kill men, take all their resources, all their money and wealth, and bribe a woman into your life. But it's the same outcome in the end. It's the same drive, the same motivation.
Like in Numbers 31, where they were allowed to take women who had not known a man as their own.
Get ahead of that because we'll get to the important part. Yes, that had not known a man. That's really misandric again. They don't want their goddess damaged by mere mortals.
Then you may go to her and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. If you are not pleased with her, let her go wherever she wishes. You must not sell her or treat her as a slave, since you have dishonored her. Okay, so this might seem like a confusing and bizarre passage on the surface.
It isn't. Men worship women. The worship of women is the oldest religion. It surpasses all others. This makes perfect sense to me.
But this law is ultimately designed for the protection of a female war captive. Here are some.
But there's nothing designed for the male war captives. They don't even get to be captive. They just get butchered.
Details to take notice of. First, Israelite men are commanded to not treat these women as mere objects. Other nations' armies could simply rape female captives of war and throw them away like nothing.
This is an example of something that we see over and over again when people are defending the evils of the Bible. It wasn't as bad as other things people did at the time, so we're good. Yeah, maybe if we're playing the which ancient text is less sexist game, that argument could be made.
But it is an important argument because you're arguing for misogyny. Now, misogyny means that women are treated worse than men. So the who is worse argument is a proper argument. Because if the men are treated worse than the women, which they are, then it's not misogynistic, it's misandric. Even little boys will be butchered while their women folk get snatched up for wives. So this is important. It's whether you can actually say accurately whether something is misogynistic or not. Okay? Now, let's see. Oh, yeah, I want to get right here because here's another thing. Here's a woman. I want to talk about leadership. Leadership means servitude. When they say men should be leaders, they mean men should serve. And women understand that. That's why women flock to the church and talk about leadership.
Participant in how submission should look and how God intended it to work. So it's not that God's saying to us ladies that we have no value, you have no purpose or meaning, you just do what you're told. No, inherent in the definition of submission is that you understand that because you have a lot to offer, because you come into marriage as a helpmate to your spouse, only one person can lead. And you are choosing to submit to your husband and allowing him to go before you.
Yeah.
Now, when she says leadership, she means that men make all the hard decisions. And if there's any blowback or consequences, the man takes the brunt of them. In other words, he works for the woman. That's what the protection means, right? If there's any fallout, the man suffers it. And this woman is basically saying to the women, she says, look, girls, you do not want to be in charge officially, openly, because then if things go tits up, you can be blamed. Now, what you want to do is you want to be in charge. You want to manage the family while the guy protects and serves. You've got want to manage the family. You be in charge, but he be officially in charge when things go bad. And that's what leadership is. It's risk and what's the other one? I'm screwing up the word. But the thing is, they're not good for a man, right? And women are smart. And again, believe it or not, that's why they flock to the church. The church is on their side. The church isn't just on their side. The church serves them. They're saying, find me a high status man who will work for me, who I can discard. The church allows divorce and allows child support. So these women can marry these men and discard them and leech off them. So believe it or not, you have no rights to talk about women being, used by men by being forced sex, right? It's not even being said in the scriptures that you normally bash. This guy's usually pretty good at, taking the scriptures to task. But now they're working against him, and he's too much of a woman worshiper and a fool to see that. You understand that? And that's why this is so appropriate for him. Talk about disgusting. Anyway, I've said everything I need to say to this awful person. I won't call him a clown. He's not just a fool. You are dangerous to other men. You are a misandrist. And you should be ashamed of making this video. And the fact that you say you're not good enough to talk for women, and then you do for an hour, just shows you just what a lowlife you are, believe it or not. So let's end it here.